Welcome once again to Auto Mundial, the weekly home of all the latest motoring news and reviews. In an electrifying show this week, the world-famous Range Rover gets one step closer to eco-friendliness.
We've also got a class of the hyper-luxurious coupes from either side of the pond.
Plus, EV tech doesn't have it all its own way this week, as the Chevrolet Corvette is refreshed, all while retaining a burbling V8.
That's all coming up. First though, the news.
The US and UK have come to an agreement that should serve to reduce pressure on the British automotive industry. Following President Trump's trade tariff announcement earlier this year, the UK government has been hard at work to cut its blanket 25% tariff on exported goods across the Atlantic, and it seems that an agreement has finally been signed. As part of the new deal, up to 100,000 cars can be imported into the US from UK manufacturers at a reduced 10% tariff, with further models beyond that quota returning to the original 25% tax, no doubt adding extra complexity to automakers. According to figures by the Society for Motor Manufacturers and Traders, the UK exports around 100,000 vehicles to the US, last year sending 102,000 across the pond. So whilst the deal does provide relief in the short term, the lack of space for expansion may well cause concern.
It may not feel like it, but the latest generation C8 Corvette has been around for a good while now. First shocking the world with its mid-engine layout in 2019, automotive enthusiasts have now had 6 years to get used to the historic overhaul. And in fact, the new age American supercar now almost feels a little long in the tooth. And it seems that Chevrolet agrees with that, as the Vette has finally been facelifted for the 2026 model year, and much like many modern updates, it isn't a power boost or visual refresh that headlines the model's rejuvenation. Instead, the Corvette has been down to the local home improvement store for a subtle interior design touch-up. Those used to the outgoing car will notice that this new model gets a reprofiled dashboard sporting not one, not two, but 3 screens, all of which wrap around the driver, showing who's in charge. From the 14-inch central infotainment screen to the 12.7-inch driver display and 6.6-inch additional touchscreen, the whole thing now runs on Google's built-in infotainment software, a bit of tech we've praised in the past for its ease of use and speed. Though, should you own an Apple device, the car also supports CarPlay as well as Android Auto for phone connectivity. Aside from screen-based tech, the centre console has also been remodeled to feature a pair of cup holders, a grab handle for the passenger, and further buttons for air conditioning controls, plus the odd USB charging port. Step outside of the cabin and there's very little change to the Corvette, still sporting sharp looks that are yet to age since its first introduction in C8 form. The lineup retains its 4-strong assault made up of the basic Stingray, slightly sportier Z06, hybrid E-Ray and the range-topping ZR1. Pricing is yet to be announced, though we'd expect little growth from the current model's $70,000 starting price.
Traditionally, the Ford Explorer name has referred to an enlarged premium SUV with dimensions only fitting the wider routes of the United States of America. Now, though, the EV revolution is forcing manufacturers to recycle well-known names, helping to popularize upcoming all-electric products. And so, like a newborn called Marjorie, the Explorer is now making its march on the UK market in a more bite-sized form. Though still a boxy model with proud design elements and an upright stance, we still think of the newest blue oval SUV as getting quite the American persona. Inside, cup holders and vast storage bins go some way to fitting the same image, though filled to the brim with tech from the 14.6-inch infotainment screen running on silky smooth Sync Move software. to the digital drive display. It also gets a touch of upmarket class. That being said, when it comes to standard fitment, the Explorer does leave a lot to be desired, with the base style trim level very much lacking creature comforts like heated seats and a sunroof. If you're familiar with the equally new Ford Capri, you'll recognise the Explorer's trio of power offerings. On the more tame end of the spectrum is the standard range model with a 52 kWh battery and a 170 brake horsepower motor on the rear axle. In extended range form, the Explorer gets a 77 kWh battery and 285 brake horsepower, whilst an all-wheel drive model with a marginally larger power unit and 340 brake horsepower is also available, though it does feel a little unnecessary. Extended range models will achieve a little under 300 miles from a charge, whilst the standard range car gets 180, explaining its far cheaper price. Coming in at £41,500, it is on the more affordable end of the scale, but will no doubt leave you wanting more endurance. For the more potent extended range car then, you will be spending around £48,000, which does sound like a lot more money, but should be worth it in the long run.
First launched in 2020, the Skoda Enyaq has had plenty of time to bed into the UK market and has, as a result, become quite the popular family car. But early this year, it received a major visual facelift, better aligning it with the L-Rock's sharp front fascia. Underneath, it is still the same popular model, however, retaining its choice of 59 or 77 kilowatt-hour battery packs, good for between 270 and 360 miles on a charge. At the lower end of that spectrum is the entry-level Enyaq 60, sporting the smaller battery and pairing it with a 200 brake horsepower motor on the rear axle. Above that sit a pair of equally powerful 285 bhp models in either rear or all-wheel drive form, dubbed the 85 and 85X respectively. For its greater range, we would suggest the rear-driven model, as the X does lose around 30 miles of potential on average. Inside, as is usually the case with Skoda models, everything is very plush and well thought out, the cabin getting a spacious layout with nice design pieces. Whilst we'd like to see a smaller screen better fit in the dashboard, all of its 13 inches now come as standard following the recent facelift, as do 3-zone aircon, adaptive cruise control and keyless entry. A long wheelbase model, the rear seats get good legroom, though the coupe variant will restrict headroom for taller individuals, and the boot is best described as a cavern with its 585 litres, far larger than the Ford's 445. All that is available from £39,000, sitting it pretty much perfectly alongside the new Blue Oval EV, though the more capable 85 powertrain does command a £5,000 bonus, a similar price hike compared to the larger battery Explorer.
After the break, is a Range Rover still a Range Rover if it doesn't down a tank of fuel every time you start it up?
Welcome back. Can Cadillac finally compete against the best in the luxury business? Find out later in the show.
A cavernous and comfy cabin full of luscious luxuries and a daring design. The Range Rover is the ultimate road-going accessory for the rich and famous. But there's one issue with this hyper-luxurious, petrol-chugging statement of wealth, and that's the pain inflicted on your A-lister conscience every time you start it up to the sound of burbling cylinders. And that's where this comes in, or rather will come in. as currently being put through its paces in its final stages of testing is the all-new, all-electric and all-eco Range Rover. After a first testing stage in the desert over the summer, the upcoming Rangie has now returned from a 45,000-mile test in sub-zero conditions well within the Arctic Circle, ensuring that every element of its powertrain can handle extreme weather conditions and harsh off-road environments. Visually, this is far from the final product, with JLR simply using a current Range Rover platform to perfect the EV underpinnings, and so under the surface is where things get interesting. Sitting below the luxurious cabin is an 800-volt, 117-kilowatt-hour battery, good for over 300 miles of range and super fast charging. Thanks to the model's still in development therm-assist system, that's the battery temperature management kit, those figures shouldn't vary too much, even when out here in Finland. Lots of all-wheel drive electric torque should ensure the new Range Rover is still the off-roading specialist it always was, and an electric motor in each axle totals 540 brake horsepower. That's a little more than the petrol-burning V8. Still very much in its development phase, the electric Range Rover is still a little off final release, though a 2025 launch is still expected.
Here in the UK, we love the VAUXHALL Corsa. So much so, in fact, that in April of this year alone, we bought over 2,300 of the things, making it the third most popular car in the country. But the automotive industry is an ever-changing beast, and so to keep up with consumer demands, even the best in the business has to evolve with the times. And so that brings us to this. The VAUXHALL Corsa's electric variant has received a bit of a refresh for this year, bringing improvements across the board that are sure to keep road users coming back for more. Though with very few visual tweaks, you'd be hard-pressed to tell the new from the old. In fact, the majority of the facelift's work comes under the surface, where, in all-electric specification, the Corsa gets new vehicle-to-load capabilities, allowing you to power external devices directly from the battery. Meanwhile, the larger 51-kilowatt long-range battery gets a minor improvement in range thanks to greater drivetrain efficiency, up from 252 to 266 miles. Power comes from a single front-mounted motor, providing 156 brake horsepower. Now, if you can't muster the £30,500 starting price of the long-range battery, a marginally smaller 50 kilowatt-hour unit is available starting from £29,000. Achieving 40 miles fewer from each charge and boasting 136 brake rather than the higher specs 156, you do seem to give up a lot for the minor price difference. Inside, the Corsa is still the perfectly pleasant place it always was. Nothing exceptional, but enough to get you from A to B. We do like the sleek screen integration, and higher trim levels are full of tech, making it a competitive entrant in class, as its sales figures from the year so far would attest.
A fierce rival to the Corsa's combustion variant in recent sales figures has been the Volkswagen Golf. Not quite yet ready to ship in EV form, however, the Corsa will find strong competition in the form of the Volkswagen ID.3, a spiritual equivalent to the Golf in all-electric form. A taller take on the hatchback, the ID.3 does look bulkier than the Corsa on the road, but with sleek design pieces throughout the body, it still looks just as attractive as its Griffin-fronted rival. Currently transitioning from pre-facelift to updated models, the ID.3 is on sale with 4 confusing battery options available, but the only 2 that you need to be aware of with their more recent and refreshed underpinnings are the 58 kWh Pro and 77 kWh Pro S for 266 or 347 miles of range respectively. Both get a healthy 200 bhp and both match the Corsa's ability to charge from 10 to 80% in around 30 minutes. From large and nicely laid out screens and heated seats to a plethora of charging ports and voice-operated controls, creature comforts as standard are abundant aboard the ID.3. But that's not all we like about the cabin. Thanks to its larger dimensions and well thought out layout, it gets good amounts of space for both front and rear passengers. More spacious inside with greater tech as standard and more efficient for greater range from a charge. You would wonder why the Corsa is so much more popular than the ID.3. And well, so would we if it didn't come down to the price, as where VAUXHALL manages to ship its Corsa E for under £30,000, Volkswagen's ID.3 doesn't start from anything below 37. And worse still, that's for the Pro model that matches the Corsa's 266-mile range. For the larger battery Volkswagen, you'll be forking out £12,000 more than the top Corsa.
The Rolls-Royce V12, smooth enough to balance a coin while running and silent as a whisper. It may be an incredible piece of engineering, but there is no denying that it's one of the least characterful engines in the industry. And so it made perfect sense for the British manufacturer to fling its gas guzzler into yesteryear and replace it with new-age electric tech in its newest vehicle, the SPECTRE. A two-door coupe replacement to the old Wraith, this is the first in what is sure to be a long line of zero-emission rollers, and now it's available in hot black badge form. Boosting power to around 660 brake horsepower and fine-tuning the model's styling with ever so slightly more combative details, this top-of-the-range model is all about looking down your nose at even the most pompous of standard Rolls-Royce owners. By Jove, could you truly not afford this superior example? Taking the standard SPECTRE as a base, the black badge also gets the two-door coupe treatment, making it a model not for passengers but for drivers. When behind the wheel, you get yourself a far more progressive cabin than other Rolls-Royce creations, with a sizable screen and additional interior control buttons. But as is always the case with a sumptuous luxury British automobile, it's the high-quality materials, each tailored to the owner's preferences, making for an ode to the upper class. Plush chairs adorned in whatever upholstery you wish provide cruising comfort to the front row, whilst brilliantly bolstered rear seats ensure no family member suffers the indecency of being flung from left to right in the corners. But there's nothing graceful or distinguished about contorting oneself over a folded seat and plummeting into the second row of a tight two-door coupe. So if you're looking for something offering a little more dignity, the Americans, and more precisely Cadillac, have always excelled at large luxury lumps.
This is the Cadillac Celestique, and just like its name, the model's design is both ostentatious and chic, both over the top and sophisticated. In fact, this more than 5.5-metre-long automobile sports some of the most eccentric styling cues we've seen on a car in a good while, with its sloping rear end and sharp tail details. And yet at the same time, the American cruiser gets an understated front end, perfectly encapsulating the manufacturer's now standard design language. We do get a sense that this lengthy model is a return to the Cadillacs of old with their extravagant dimensions. But unlike those 1970s Coupe de Vie and Eldorados, the Celestique's bonnet does not hide an overwhelming V8. Much like its rival, the Caddy is a new age sign of affluence, powered by 111 kilowatt-hour battery and a pair of electric motors. The system totals 655 all-wheel drive brake horsepower, so a similar figure to that of the Black Badge. But it isn't really about performance when it comes to these hyper-luxurious, hyper-expensive road-going symbols of indulgence, as where the Celestiq leaps ahead of the Rolls-Royce is its interior space. Better yet, it simply gets 4 doors, making sitting in the back a far simpler task. Once you've dropped into your seat, gorgeous interior styling, if a little bolder than the SPECTRE, features all top materials, a splendid amount of interior tech and supremely comfortable seats. The whole thing lit up by either fancy mood lighting or the vast sunroof. Overwhelming levels of personalisation are available for the Celestiq from the factory, though for that there will be a price. And it's sure to be a lot more than the model's base price of around $340,000. Then again, that is a bargain compared to the Rolls-Royce's price tag that will easily hit the $500,000 mark.
Next time on Auto Mundial, after 30 years, it's time to show the Ferrari F50 a little bit of love.